Okay, so I don't want to neglect the third area that you talk about in terms
Mm-hmm.
of thinking outside the brain, and this is in the area of relationships. So, of course,
Mm-hmm.
I loved these chapters so
Mm-hmm.
much,
Mm-hmm.
and in the relationships with experts, the relationships with our peers, and the relationships with groups within groups. So
Mm-hmm.
let's talk a little bit about experts, because one of the things that you talk about there is the real benefit of mimicry and copying.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's something that therapists do a lot of already,
Uh-huh.
but maybe in other areas it's not seen so positively.
Yeah, I'm sure that I would think therapists do a lot of mirroring, right? Literal mimicking and mirroring of other people's facial expressions as a way of, first of all, making them feel heard and seen. And also, as we were saying earlier when we were talking about interoception, as a way of getting a little piece of what they may be feeling. And then there's the larger sort of matter of imitation and mimicry as sort of the fastest and most efficient and most effective way to mastery of a new domain. And it's unfortunate that imitation doesn't get used as a form of learning as often as it should be, because I think our culture has such a bias towards originality, towards being the first to do something. Whereas I think older generations, going back to the ancients, to the ancient Greeks and Romans, knew that imitating the masters is the best way to develop that skill for yourself. And once you've done that, then you can put your own twist on it, your own. You can get your own, put it your own take on it. But there's nothing shameful or embarrassing or morally compromised about imitating. As long as we're all clear that it's meant to be a process of learning.
So one way to learn from experts is
Uh-huh.
through, I think athletes do this, or, I think about my young athletes,
Uh-huh.
they watch Steph Curry and how he
Right.
shoots the ball, and they imitate that, even though, they're, and so it's a way of learning. I think in the field of
Hmm.
therapy, the way we play, and, modeling, through that. Another area learning and cognition is
Hmm.
through our peers, and I was interested in some of the how much sort of our as social creatures, as social
Yeah.
creatures, we think so much better when
Yeah.
we're in groups, and when we're with peers, than when we're on our own, even though we think of thinking
Exactly.
as being an
I think we've got
individual
that
thing.
really backwards. We think if we're doing real thinking, serious thinking, that we should go into a room by ourselves and close the door and be still, right? All these things that are actually not facilitative of good thinking, because when we're socially interacting with other people, there's this whole suite of cognitive processes that get activated that remain dormant when we're thinking by ourselves, because human beings are such fundamentally social creatures. And that sociability doesn't just come out, during happy hour or during lunchtime. We're social all the time. And so the more we can leverage our social natures in the service of thinking and learning, the better off we are. And so I write in that chapter about the value of bringing in social activities like storytelling and debating and arguing and teaching other people, teaching our peers, and using those social activities to kind of supercharge our own thinking.
So how I'm applying that to my therapy practice after I learned about that, especially the teaching one, I was like, how do I use teaching to instill skills into my clients, is one of the things I've asked clients to do is go home and tell
Uh,
somebody about something that
uh,
you learned
uh-huh.
in this therapy practice and share it. Especially with, like,
Mm.
when I work with teens, it's like, go home and tell your parents about, and it's so true that as soon as you step into that role of teacher,
Mhm.
it just
Mhm,
strengthens
mhm.
your learning so much more. So it's just a great concept of, like, making things relational, and make it in a way
Mhm,
that you are
mhm,
teaching it if you want to learn
mhm.
it. What about groups? How term that you said, the extended, oh no, the range, which
Yeah,
is a little bit
and
different than group
groupiness, which
thinking.
is
Yeah.
a real term, meaning,
And groupiness.
because we've
Yeah.
all been on teams or
Yeah.
in groups that never really cohere, that just remain sort of a bunch of individuals, and then we've all been, I think, part of groups that really manage to create something like a group mind where you're thinking together, you're thinking in sync, and you have a collective intelligence that is greater than the intelligence of any one of the members. And so then the question becomes, how do you create that sense of groupiness? I really came away from the research with a strong belief that it requires people being in the same space at the same time, engaged in the same activities, So that's a real
Mm.
kind of thing for us to think about when we do conduct so much of our lives online these days, that the value of being in person with people really can't be overstated. The richness of the signals that we exchange with each other when we're in person, when we're, body to body, we're sharing the same space, just can't really be replicated online.
And I do, I think
Mhm.
that's something that I really missed with online therapy. And people, actually, the
Mhm.
research shows that online therapy is as effective as in-person therapy,
Mhm. Mhm.
but I still prefer in person. I like seeing the whole body. I like to see the foot
Mhm.
that's tapping, you know, oh, the rest of the body is completely still, or,
Mhm.
how we walk into a space and where they choose to sit down. Are
Mhm.
they sitting at the far end of the couch so they get as much distance as possible, or are they sitting closer to me? All these
Yeah.
different little things that are, yeah. Well, so as we think about these book, I mean, it's just, you could
Mhm.
read it 3 times and still feel like you could read it again, active and new information. Um, what
Mm.
How has this work
Mhm.
influenced you in your life and
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
how you're approaching, things,
Well,
getting
I
through this
definitely am
project?
much better able to see how very brain bound our culture is. That's a word that, again, that I borrowed from the philosopher Andy Clark. He talks about brain bound as the opposite or counter to the extended mind. Our culture is so very brain bound in the way we approach things like education and the work that we do in our workplace. And I recognize and realize how brain bound I have been for most of my life, and how much more dynamic and fruitful it is to bring in all these outside the brain resources. So I try to do that as much as possible now, to bring in my body, bring in my physical space, or the physical surroundings, and bring in my social nature into my thinking. It doesn't come naturally to me, but that's what I like about the extended mind, is that it's a skill that can be cultivated. And so I'm trying.
As well as I've mentioned, just little bits of it here and there. And
Thank you,
I
Diana.
just look forward to learning more from you, and always excited, what you're going to be
Thank
on to
you.
next. You're an incredible science writer
Thank,
and creative thinker.
thanks
So
so
thank you
much.
for bringing
It's been a
this book
pleasure
to life.
talking with
I know,
you.
imagine it was a lot of work. Yeah.